Let's go ahead and do a few examples in order for us to differentiate GDP with GNP. I'll give you maybe 4 or 5 examples right here, just so you guys can get a clear idea. Typical exam questions will be set up in the same manner, where I just give you a particular scenario, and it's going to be your job to tell me whether or not it's going to fall within GDP or GNP. So a few examples right here. Suppose I tell you that we are taking a look at a Toyota plant in Kentucky. Toyota plant in Kentucky. So where exactly is the production of the cars within this Toyota plant going to fall? Is it going to fall within US GDP or US GNP? Here it's going to fall within US GDP, number one, US GDP, because it is within the United States' border. Kentucky is a state within the United States, so therefore it's going to fall within US GDP. It's not going to fall within US GNP because Toyota is not a US citizen. So they are a Japanese firm or corporation. So what does this tell us about Japan? It's going to fall under Japanese or Japan GNP. So here remember that with GDP we only care about the borders of where the particular good is going to be produced. With GNP we care a little bit more about the citizenship. So here in Kentucky within US borders it's US GDP. Toyota is a Japanese company or a firm. Therefore it's going to fall within their gross national product. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at a particular individual. So a US citizen working in Japan for Microsoft. So here, now you tell me exactly where this is going to fall in terms of the United States. For the United States, is it GNP or GDP? Here, we're taking a look at a US citizen. We're also taking a look at Microsoft, which is a US corporation. So both of them are telling that, yes, this is going to fall within US GNP. Not necessarily US GDP, because it is not within US borders. We're only focusing in on the citizenship right here. Because the citizen is working in Japan, Microsoft, the corporation, maybe the firm has some operations there, is going to be in Japan. It's going to be in Japanese GDP. So Japan GDP. So once again, we want to differentiate between where it's actually where the goods being produced and exactly the citizenship. What happens if this were a Japanese citizen working in Japan? Then that's where we actually have to be a little bit more granular, a little bit more specific. Are we talking a little bit more just about Microsoft itself, or are we talking about the citizen, the work that he or she is doing? If we're just talking about the citizen, then we're just going to focus in on the citizenship of that particular individual, and that's where we would fall under GNP. If we're just talking about Microsoft in general, then we just focus in on the citizenship of this firm or corporation. So in all of these examples that we take a look at, we are going to be very specific, as granular as we can, in order to make sure that you identify it correctly within GDP or GNP. So one more example right here. I'll go ahead and write this down. Let's go ahead and take a look at this particular example with Ryan Reynolds. So the salary, Ryan Reynolds. So if you don't know who Ryan Reynolds is, he's a very famous actor. He is from Canada, if you didn't know that. So he is a Canadian citizen, a very sexy Canadian. So the salary that Ryan Reynolds earns when he goes to shoot Deadpool 3. When he goes to shoot Deadpool 3, or X-Force, or whatever the movie may be called, and suppose that he shoots it in Vancouver. So here, anytime I get a chance to talk about Ryan Reynolds, I will. So here, the salary that Ryan Reynolds, who is a Canadian citizen, earns when he goes to shoot Deadpool 3. In terms of Canada, where is this going to fall? Number one, it's going to fall within Canadian GDP because it's shot in Vancouver. So here we go. It's within Canada's border, so therefore it's GDP. But it's also going to fall within GNP as well because we're talking about Ryan Reynolds, who is a Canadian citizen. So here it falls under both Canadian GDP and GNP. And once again, we're only caring about the salary that he earns and not necessarily the movie or the movie production corporation in this instance. So once again, we're very granular. We're very specific about what we're taking a look at in these examples. And you'll notice that a lot of movies are actually shot in Vancouver or Toronto. You'll notice that if you ever stay to the end of the credits, they'll thank the city or the country that they're in, basically because of tax reasons. So a lot of movies nowadays are actually shot in Canada for tax reasons. Let's go ahead and change this example up just a little bit and ask, what happens if the movie were shot in LA instead, were shot in Los Angeles instead. Now you tell me or think about exactly where this is going to fall in terms of GDP and GNP. In terms of the United States, it's going to fall in terms of US GDP because it's shot in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, and around that area. So therefore, it's going to fall in GDP. It's still going to fall in terms of Canada, GNP, because once again, Ryan Reynolds is still a Canadian citizen. So here, even though we changed things up just a little bit, you notice how the answer is going to change as well. So here, once again, with these examples, we're just trying to differentiate GNP and GDP, where it's going to fall in terms of each of these countries. And with the examples that we bring up, we'll be pretty specific about exactly these examples right here. So two examples that we're going to see on these slides right here, just to finish up our discussion right here. Brooks running shoes that are made in China count towards US GNP. Number one, because Brooks is going to be seen as a US corporation, but not GDP because these shoes are actually manufactured in China. So it's going to fall within Chinese GDP. And a Toyota Avalon assembled in the United States counts towards US GDP, once again within our borders, but not GNP because Toyota is seen as a Japanese company. So therefore, it would be falling within Japanese GNP. So once again, figure out the similarities and differentiation between GDP and GNP, and you'll be good to go for this particular section. In our next video, we're finally going to go ahead and take a look at GDP, the calculation using the expenditure approach, and take a look at a few of the specific variables that are going to come along with the equation and formula that we take a look at. I'll see you guys there.